have to reveal that list of people that gave money to his campaign, that's when he resigned. So I think there's so many things that sort of came from this, and we're still learning about it. And I think the biggest issue amongst three very big issues is this issue of dark money. And I think it's a bigger issue than people realize. And like I said, Greitens is a mini Trump. And so this issue with dark money reaches far and wide. And I think we're seeing it on a national level as well. And I think it illustrates why dark money is so dangerous. I mean, just take a look at this guy who was our governor. He was unknown. He had no real allegiance to the Republican Party. He was formally a Democrat, which is shocking. He was formally a Democrat. He was a Dem until I don't know the year, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. I mean, this is a very recent about face that he did. He never held political office. And then all of a sudden he's our governor. So obviously it took a lot of money. We don't know where it came from. And then when it was time to shine a light on it, the guy who never quits decided to quit. So it's troubling because I would like to see our legislature continue that commitment to finding out the source of that dark money. It seems to be subsiding. I know that the House committee that was investigating Greitens, and they were investigating all of it, everything. That House committee has been dissolved. It's possible that it was just had to be dissolved on a technicality because their wording of the reason why this House committee was formed was to investigate the governor. Well, he's no longer the governor. So it's unclear if that investigation is going to continue once the House is back in session. So, I hope that there is a continued commitment to finding out the sources of this dark money. I do know that just today, like I said, this story just keeps changing and things being added to it. Just today, there was a lawyer in St. Louis, I believe his name is Eldad Gross, and he sent a letter to the Secretary of State asking them to investigate Anew, Missouri, which was Greitens' sort of fundraising tool. And this lawyer is saying that Anew, Missouri is not maintaining a registered office. It seems as if this lawyer has sent mail and certified mail to this office, and there's no one there to accept it. So they're not really maintaining an office, which is required by law if you're going to have this sort of nonprofit who doesn't release names of people that donate money to it. So, and that literally happened today. And by the time that this program airs, there might be something new. It's just, it never changes. I mean, the bottom line is that Greitens is not a good guy, and I'm glad that he's gone. Unfortunately, our lieutenant governor became the governor, Parsons, and one could argue that he's even more dangerous than Greitens because the simple fact is that Greitens wasn't liked at all in Jeff City. He certainly didn't have friends on the Democratic side. And he made a lot of enemies on the Republican side. So his agenda kind of stalled. I mean, he did get right to work passed. He got a few things passed. But a lot of the things that I think that he wanted to push through didn't get pushed through because he just didn't really have any friends there. Parsons is a lot more palatable to a lot of Republicans in Jeff City. And so in that way, he's even more dangerous because, Democrats in the state, we're even more worried now because we're afraid that Republican agenda is just going to get pushed through now that there's a sort of, kinder and gentler, in quotes, sarcasm, Republican governor.
Something to be mindful of at the national level.
Yes. But I'm still glad that Greitens is gone. And that's, I would say the same thing, about Trump. That, we can't obviously not get Trump the heck out of there because we're afraid Pence will get in. All right, well, then we'll work on Pence. Next, we'll just keep going.
So does Parson have until 2020 or?
Yes, I believe he has until 2020. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Too bad.
Yeah. Yes, I know.
Now there's this kinder, gentler to Republicans governor. There is a supermajority in the House, in the state House, a supermajority in the state Senate. First of all, how bad are things going to get? And second, do you think that some of that supermajority might be reduced in the 2018 election?
I mean, how bad are they going to get? I mean, it's really the question is how bad it is now. And it's bad, especially in the House that has, that supermajority. I talk to people that go to Jeff City all the time, and I talk to other Democratic legislators. And I mean, sometimes they can't even get to the microphone to say a few words about a specific bill. Like the Republicans just literally shut them out. It's a hard fight every day in Jeff City. So it's really bad now. Can it change in 2018 in November? Yes, I really think it can. I mean, for example, we spoke of Lauren Arthur a few moments ago. And also we have to look at some other special elections that happened back in February. There was a Democrat, Mike Revis, who was in the 97th district in the House. And his district is a little bit of St. Louis County, but mostly sort of southern Jefferson County, which is south of St. Louis. It's a little bit more rural. And that seat in the House flipped to a Democrat, and it had been Republican for a long time. And so, you know, we were able to flip that seat. Another seat to note was Democrat Jim Skaggs in the 144th district. He ran for the House seat in that district. Now, he did not win, but his opponent won by a very, very narrow victory. And that specific district went overwhelmingly for Trump in 2016. You know, I think the seeds of change are planted. I do get a little nervous when a lot of Dems keep talking about the blue wave is coming. And, you know, that's great, but we got to work for that blue wave. It's not just going to sit there and, you know, wash over us because some people don't like Trump. I mean, we have to work for it. We have to make phone calls. We have to canvass. We have to give our time. We have to give our money. We have to make sure that, you know, our friends and family know where to vote and drive them to the voting polls. I mean, we need to work for that blue wave. But I think we have a chance of overturning the House, or it's most definitely making it a little bit less red, making it a lot less red.
I'm glad you mentioned Mike Revis because he was the first person I ever wrote postcards to voters for. And
awesome.
I followed his race so closely and was so excited when he won. And everybody at my job was like, why are you so excited about this race in Missouri? And I'm like, you don't understand. It's so cool.
You know, well, in Indivisible St. Louis, we wrote postcards for him. We wrote postcards for all four of the Democratic candidates that were running in that February special election. And, you know, we only got one of those seats. Well, they won one of those seats, and that was Mike Revis's seat. But like I said, for example, in Jim Skaggs' district, I mean, that was a heavy, heavy Trump district. And boy, he came razor close to winning that seat. So it was very exciting.
So it seems like it should be possible for Missouri.
Well, yes, I wanted to speak to that. Now, I'm a city girl, so I say Missouri. But I think sort of in more rural Missouri, or as they say in Missouri, outstate. That's what they call sort of like, which doesn't, I'm not like, okay, that's what they say. They say outstate. So in more outstate Missouri, I think it is referred to as Missouri. I say Missouri. And sometimes when it's really hot, I might say misery.
I was looking at, you know, sort of reading up on the history of politics in Missouri, and it looks like, you know, it was a bellwether state. It was a true swing state, what we'd call purple now, for really much of its history in the 20th century, at least. And it's only been since 2010 that's really, maybe 2008, that's really started to change. And now, and I thought about that this time around, 2016, looking at the map, you know, I looked at the states that I thought might go either way, and I was like, wait, Missouri is just like deep red now. How did that happen? It strikes me that maybe this is a place that is just anxious for change. And, you know, so it started to see the Republicans as the party of change, but maybe they will become just as disgruntled with Republicans and start to look at Democrats again for change.
That would be great. I would hope that would happen. You know, I think it's a great question. You know, why are we a mostly red state? I mean, and I hear that a lot from people who have lived here for a long time. I've only been here about 10 years, but people who have lived here, you know, their whole lives often say things like, well, gosh, growing up, we were just we were kind of blue, or we were purple, and we were a strong Union state. And, it's a great question. I don't know the answer to it. I would think that voter turnout certainly has some place into this a little bit or a lot. You know, something that we don't have in Missouri is early voting. So I think sometimes, you know, we don't get voter turnout in the same way that they do in other states. But again, I think it's a really complex issue, and I wish I had more insight on it, but I really don't.
Yeah, one of the things I was reading suggested that the reason it's no longer a bellwether is that Missouri is much less diverse than the country as a whole. I don't know how they come up with these numbers or how exactly they're defining diversity, but that it's 20% less diverse than the country. And so that might, as the political parties have become very much aligned along race lines, that could start to explain some of it.
It certainly could. I mean, all I can tell you just is from my perspective, living in St. Louis, that, I feel like I live in a very diverse place. There's a lot of issues, involving that, but I do think St. Louis is extremely diverse. So again, I don't have a whole lot of information for you on that one. I think it's pretty complex, but I would like to think that it's, it went from blue to purple to red, and maybe it's kind of swinging back the other way. That would be great.
Missouri, of course, is also in the terrible cross-check program. Since we're talking about voter turnout, the program started in Kansas, and I want to say Missouri is actually where it's housed now. The insecure data.
Yes.
Is actually housed. And, with the Supreme Court ruling saying that, states can go ahead and throw people off if they don't vote, I think that things like crosscheck and states' use of crosscheck to disenfranchise and unregister voters is going to get pretty troubling.
Yeah, I mean, it's very troubling. Missouri's own Jason Kander, who is from Kansas City, he started a whole organization called Let America Vote. It's a great organization, and that's exactly the kinds of things that, they're worried about and they're following and they're fighting against. And it comes as no surprise that organization popped out from someone in Missouri.
So the last question I have, at least, is about Claire McCaskill. So we're talking about this deep red state, but you have a Democratic senator who's a woman, who's very likable as a Democrat. So do we think she's running against someone, presumptive nominee of the Republicans, I think, is Josh?
Correct.
Josh
Hawley.
Mm-hmm. So, do we think that Claire McCaskill is going to be safe this time around? Do people in Missouri like her? What's that race look like?
Well, McCaskill walks a very fine line here in Missouri. A friend of mine once described Missouri as sort of like a mini United States. So, we've got Kansas City on the West Coast, and St. Louis on the East Coast, if you will, if you're kind of looking at it in that way. And then apart from, at least in Missouri, a few college towns that are pretty liberal, the rest of the state, just like much of the rest of the country, is primarily rural conservative voters. So Claire really has a pretty big balancing act. She represents an extremely, and you're saying before that, Missouri isn't very diverse. Well, I think she represents an extremely diverse electorate in terms of political views. And so, she's never going to please everybody. I think there are some people in, Kansas City or in St. Louis who may think that she's not progressive enough. And then, of course, you have your outstate voters who think that she's too progressive. She walks a fine line, and I think that line that she walks doesn't have to be walked by many other senators. There's not a lot of senators that come from states like hers where she really has this balance. I certainly feel, and I feel like a lot of Democratic liberal voters understand that she walks that delicate balance, and she is in a unique position. And that even though we don't always support all of her votes, we absolutely want her reelected in November. And we're going to do everything we can to make that happen.
Great. Is there anything else you wanted to make sure we mention about Missouri?
I mean, I think you can't not talk about being an activist in Missouri, and I alluded to this a little bit ago. Unlike some of my friends in blue states, we here in St. Louis fight injustice on every level. We fight it locally, we fight it at the state level, we fight it nationally. Of course, you have to, think about in terms of local level, we fight injustices in terms of, the deaths of unarmed Black men dying at the hands of police. We fight injustices in terms of the St. Louis County prosecutor, who many in this region feel like he really mishandled the Michael Brown case. And of course, we also think about in terms of the state level, we have Greitens, and now, of course, we have Parsons, who's potentially more dangerous than Greitens. And then, of course, on the national level, we're fighting. We're always fighting Trump. We've got our Republican Senator Blunt, who is really disliked He won by a very, very narrow margin, and he's really disliked. And of course, we got to talk about good old Republican Ann Wagner in Congressional District 2.